I about emptied that whole bottle of hardener just on those hammers. So.
Okay.
Some people say, oh, that's going to make them heavy. That it doesn't add much weight to it.
Uh-huh.
But now we're going to look at the keys. Like I said, I'm going to look at, there's a pin. Let's see here. You've got a good angle from that side, right?
Yeah.
Just the key construction. I think that's worth taking a close look at it while we're here.
Yeah, let's do it.
So we've got these pins. This is the front. The action, we call it in 3 rails. We've got the front rail here that runs underneath the balance rail that the key balances and pivots on, and the back rail that the back of the key rests on.
Okay.
Now the key pins fit inside a mortise, which has got a woven cloth glued in there. The cloth it controls that fit. It allows you to kind of size it differently.
Sure.
Whether you want, a tighter or a looser fit. And then we also have pins here that go through a hole. That hole needs to be nice and tight, but free enough that everything feels good as you're playing.
Yeah, I've actually noticed a huge difference as Hyrum and then Russell, another technician who actually sold us our piano. When they've eased those off, sometimes they get a little too tight, and it's like, man, this key feels so heavy. It's because it's fighting against that, and then they kind of loosen that up or lube it up. How would you do that, by the way?
I'll pull out right now because I'll pull my tool out that I use. It depends on what area you're easing. There's 3 points of friction here. Okay. Usually when a piano feels weird or gross, it's because there's some kind of excess friction.
Sure.
And so on the key, we've got a few points. We've got the front rail here. We've got the hole on the bottom that could have some friction. And we also have this mortise right here with bushing cloth on it.
Okay.
Those 3 points we look at, make sure that they're all the way they should. Now, these pianos are prepped really, really well in the factory, compared to different things you could buy on the market.
Okay.
But that being said, I mean, we're talking thousandths of an inch difference, and this is wood. It can change with shipping. It can change with the environment. So I'm going to just use some pliers, essentially. There's one that was a little tight to me. I want to feel a nice bump, but not too much of a bump. Old pianos that are really worn in, they're chattering together like teeth, Yeah.
Mine had that the other day. Before it was worked on, I'd go up for these big jumps in list, and my piano would snap, it'd be like an audible snap. And Russell was just like, oh yeah, that just needs to be, I think it was a friction point that was too loose. He's like, that needs to be tightened up a little bit. So. Yeah,
so this sharp here, this one's to the point where I'd be afraid, okay, it gets in your house and all of a sudden it's sticking. Because when the front rail's tight, that is pretty much game over. You'll get a sluggish or a sticking key. Some of the other points, you may not get a sticking key, but it just adds to the gunk in between you and the music,
Sure.
So this is the mortise. I'm just going to squeeze it with these tools just very gently. It's hardly anything really that I'm doing.
Okay.
And they use high quality felt and stuff. It works very well in your hands.
I'm going to get a close up.
Yeah, I'm going to do another one. I think there's another one I wanted to hit down here. These few right here. You got that there? Mm-hmm. So I'm just easing it.
Oh, okay.
Hence easing the keys.
Cool. Sounds great.
Oh, you also might, of interest, the leading that's in the keys. That was a big issue on your piano that we were looking at, right?
Yeah.
Some of the old pianos, if the geometry's not good, then you're having to lift a hammer that's a little heavier. You'll see a lead every, what is this, half inch or so or inch, all the way up to the balance point, just totally leaded. I mean, I could barely pick up the action at that point. That's how I know, okay, it's maybe a little excessive. Yours wasn't quite to that point, but it was getting there.
Yeah. And can you explain what too much lead in the key? Because people might be thinking like a seesaw, if there's more lead, what would that do?
Yeah.
Does it make your job harder? Does it make it easier, like down or up? Or does it just make everything worse?
The leading on the front of the key, it's on this balance point here, it'll make the front of the key drop a little easier. Right now we're lifting the weight that's put on this capstan screw right here. So the more lead you have, it goes down easier. But you have a lot of lead in there, it also wants to stay down. It doesn't want to return as fast if you get too much.
I see.
So we go for optimal control where it feels, fast and responsive, but not so much lead that either you won't return and you won't have as fast repetition, or the other issue is if you get a lot of lead in that key, picture swinging a wood baseball bat versus a lead baseball bat.
Yeah.
I mean, that may not be the exact analogy, but more mass is harder to move because of a thing called moment of inertia. So if you get too much lead in the key, that becomes a problem. So you might weigh the piano and say, well, it's really light to push down. It should be a light piano. But actually, you can have it where it still feels heavy, even though the numbers say it's light.
So far, I mean, my brain goes to, oh, I love a nice up weight, because the more the key pushes back on your finger, the quicker the response is. So I would say, why don't we pull some of that lead out? But what are the dangers of just, pulling lead out? Obviously, the down weight would be harder, correct?
It becomes
Heavier?
too difficult to play. Yeah, so it becomes heavy from that respect.
Gotcha.
So
it's a balancing act. And what are some of the parameters that Steinway or other reputable piano brands go for so far as down weight, up weight ratios?
Yeah, a lot of technicians in the industry talk about 50-20.
Okay.
50 grams of weight to displace the hammer to where it's balanced and it starts to move the hammer up.
Uh-huh.
And 20, that means if you put a 20-gram weight on the front of the key where your finger hits it, it'll be able to push that weight back up. Now, I think that's way too heavy for a really good piano.
Uh-huh.
Steinway Ds, and they grade it, so it's heavier down weight in the bass, and it grades up all the way to the treble. So like a Steinway D is going to be, I think they aim for, like 40, we looked it up when I looked it up when I did your piano. It was like 46, I want to say, and it changes every 2 or 3 octaves by a gram.
Oh, only 46 in the bass.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to say that's about right. I could be off on that. I have to pull out the manual. But honestly, theory and practice are two very different things. They can have their specs that they shoot for, but they come out when they're brand new in lots of different versions. You might have a piano that could be more inconsistent than what you'd think because you've got friction coming into play. You got all kinds of different variables there.
Sure. One of the reasons we needed Hyrum to redo this is we had like 60 grams down weight on ours, but really high up weight too. It was like 35 grams, I think, it just was a lot of work both directions. And so we used some spring-assisted whippings, what they used to use in some Hamburg Steinways, and that felt funny. So can you tell them what you did on my piano in particular? Because even though the spring-assisted whippings help with the down weight, doesn't it kill your up weight?
It can, just like with the lead, if you add too much lead. The springs he's talking about, they're on the top stack that we took off, but essentially they help suspend the weight of the hammer and the whipping below it. And so if you make that spring stronger, it's kind of this equivalent of adding lead to the key. So the same thing, if you add too much lead, your down weight is going lower, right? So it can push up a decreasing amount of weight the more lead you add.
So the down weight's easier to push down, but it's way harder to get it back up.
Harder to get back up. So the same thing would be if you load it with too much spring, your up weight is going to be really low. And there's some and you know what, a really high up weight's not great either. In theory it sounds good, but then you've got some digital pianos out there in the market. That's kind of what they feel like.
Oh, okay.
It's kind of just a weird feel. You know?
Definitely. It is a balancing act, and every person is different with their, like, if you are, I've taught a lot of retirees that just want to play slow, soft music. You'll probably love a really heavy action because all that weight feels, at least in my hands, to give you a lot more control. I'm playing the Liszt Paganini Etudes right now. I'm working on them. A high down weight is just absolutely killer because you're exhausted. Even if you've got a light piano, you can get tired during those pieces. So it depends on the repertoire that you're playing, and I'm not saying you got to buy a new piano for every different composer you want to play, but having something middle ground is quite important. I think we ended on my piano like 40, like high 40s in the bass up to mid to low 40s up in the treble, and it's feeling really nice.
Yeah, I think, yours is, and now yours is definitely on the lighter side, I would say.
Yeah.
You know, even more, probably lighter than what you might find out of the box.
Sure.
But that can vary. So I'm just easing these holes where the pin sticks through. Like I said, we don't play the key up, but when I push it up a little bit, it gives a little bit of indication of how tight this hole is. And I want them to be, first and foremost, uniform. So I'm just using a reamer here that's actually, just the right size. It's a few thousandths larger than what this pin size is.
Perfect.
I say thousandths, a few thousandths of an inch, just in case someone's working metrics. I go back and forth all the time because I have specs in my head that are, some I like to think of in millimeters and others in decimal inches, but.